Welcome to my video over circles in the coordinate plane. We're going to start off with our equations of a circle. So the equation of a circle is just going to be our x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. So hk is going to be the center of your circle. Xy is just going to be a point on the circle. And then r is your radius of the circle. The equation of a circle is going to be used to identify a circle or parts of a circle, such as the radius, the center, or a point. So we have different types of problems you might see. We're going to start off here with 1 through 3, where they're asking you to write the equation of a circle with the given center and radius in standard form. Okay, to clarify, standard form is that equation I had given you on the first line with that x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals to your r squared. So what we're going to do here is just going to plug in our center for that h and that k. So here we would have x minus, we've got -1 squared plus our y minus k squared is equal to our r squared. Okay, so when you plug into your equation here, the only things you want to do is just simplify, if you have that double negative like I do in the first parentheses. So I'm going to simplify that into x plus 1 squared plus we'll have our y minus 3 squared. And lastly is going to be, you actually should be squaring your radius and not leaving it as 2 squared. So we would just square it. 2 squared is going to give me 4. And this would be my standard form equation of our circle. Okay, to clarify what I did here, you can just go ahead and go straight into plugging it in and changing that sign into your equation. You don't have to show this before you get into this step here. All right, now let's move into number 2 here. So for number 2 here, we are going to plug in, we've got our x plus 14, because like I said, we're just going to change that sign. And then we'll have our y minus 6 is going to be equal to our radius squared. So right now we currently have 6 for our diameter, and so we're going to take half of that and we are squaring it. So 6 divided by 2, and then we'll square it. Okay. And so my final answer would be x plus 14 squared plus we'll have our y minus 6 squared is going to be equal to 9. Now let's look at number 3. Okay, for number 3 here, same idea. We are going to plug in our center, our h and our k, so we'll have x minus 0 squared plus, and we'll have our y minus 4 squared is equal to our radius, that root 12 squared. Okay, so a lot of times when you have a 0 plugged in for your h or your k or even both, we don't usually write x minus 0. We will usually just simplify into, and you'll see this in a few problems, of just that x squared. And then for our y, we'll have y minus 4 squared. And key thing is just remember here, when you square a square root, they cancel out. And so you're left with just a 12. All right, now let's move into the next set of problems where you are asked to identify the center, the radius, and the diameter of each circle equation. Okay, and so this is going to be a great example of what I had mentioned previously. Here you'll see we have our x plus 3 squared plus y squared equals to 4. They don't have y minus 0 because, like I said, you really don't see that if you are fully simplified. And so it's just going to be understood that that is a 0. And so we'll have for our center -3, 0. Then to find my radius, remember that is your r squared. So my r squared is equal to 4. And so I need to take the square root of both sides to get 2 for my radius. And then I'm just going to multiply by 2 to find my diameter. And that's going to give me 4. Okay, moving into number 5 here. For our center, we're looking at our h and our k. And so remember, when you're looking at the equation, if it's showing positive, you should be writing negative for the center. And if it's showing negative in the equation, you should be writing positive for the center. So here I would have -4, 1 as my center. Then for my radius, like I said, that r squared is equal to your 18. And so I am square rooting both sides. And then since it's not a perfect square, I'm going to simplify. We'll have 9 and 2 for my factors, which the square root of 9 is just 3. So we'll have 3 square root of 2. And then for my diameter, I'm just going to multiply that by 2. And remember, when you multiply a radical by 2, you are just going to multiply the outside number. So 2 times 3 gives you 6, and then we'll have that square root of 2. All right, and moving into the last one here, we have x minus 4 squared plus y plus 4 squared is equal to 9. So my center is going to be a +4, -4. My radius, I'm taking that square root of my 9 to get 3. And then that 2 times 3 to find my diameter gives me 6. All right, hopefully that was pretty simple. And these shouldn't be too much harder. We've got write the equation of the circle graphed and identify the center and the radius for it. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the center and the radius because once I know that, I can just plug it into my equation and that will give me the third answer I'm looking for. Okay, so finding my center here, I'm trying to figure out where the middle is. Okay, and so I am just going to look and see right about here is going to be that middle. And just double checking in order to figure out your radius from that center, it should be the same distance on all sides, up, down, left, and right. So here I'm going to check that. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so yes, that is my center. For some people, it just kind of stands out. For others, like I said, just double check yourself by counting it. So my center here would be that 2, -1. And then the radius is that 4 that I counted out 4 times. Okay, so with that being said, we can just plug into our equation. We'll have x minus 2 squared plus our y plus 1 squared is going to be equal to that 4 squared, which just gives you 16. And there you have your 3 answers. Like I said, the equation that they were asking for, as well as your center and radius. Okay, moving into number 8. Okay, like I said, for a lot of y'all, it's just, you can easily look at it and see where the middle is, but just double check by counting. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and 1, 2. So my center is going to be at 1, -3. And then I have that radius of 2 that I counted out 4 times. So I can plug into my equation. We'll get x minus 1 squared plus y plus 3 squared. It's going to be equal to that 2 squared, which will give you 4. All right, so hopefully so far these have not been too difficult. Unfortunately, when we get into this next one, we are going to have to recall some information from earlier in the year. So here we have our directions are write an equation for the circle given the following information. Okay, so let's just look and see what we have and talk about what we are going to have to bring back up. So for number 9, we have segment. A has a point at -1, 4, and B is at 5, 2. And this is going to be a diameter. Okay, so in order to write your equation, you have to first know your radius and your center. Well, given this is a diameter, we could find the center by finding the middle of it. Well, if you recall, we know some formulas that will help us here. For one, the midpoint formula is going to help us find the midpoint, the center. And then 2, to find your radius, you are going to find the length of segment. You can do AB and divide by 2. Or once you find your center, you can use that center and any one of these 2 points, A or B, to find your radius using our lovely distance formula. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to start off with my center. Okay, by plugging into my midpoint formula, which if you recall, is just us adding our x's, so -1 plus 5, and dividing it by 2. Then doing the same thing with our y, so 4 plus 2 divided by 2. Okay, so -1 plus 5 will give me 4, divided by 2 gives me 2. And then 4 plus 2 gives me 6, divided by 2 will give me 3. So my center is at 2, 3. Now, like I said, from that to find your radius, it's kind of up to you of how you want to go about it. But we are going to use that distance formula. And I'm personally going to use the center and one of the other 2 points. It doesn't matter which, just because I'm going to get smaller numbers and it will give me straight to my radius. And so because of that, I'm going to plug into my distance formula using my x1, y1 as my center, and then I'll just go ahead and use A as my x2, y2. So I will get -1 minus 2 squared plus, and then we'll have 4 minus 3 squared. Then I'm going to go through and simplify what's in my parentheses. So -1 minus 2 will give me -3 squared. Plus, and then 4 minus 3 gives me 1. And I'm going to square that. Which, when I square these numbers, I should get 9 and 1, which will give me the square root of 10 for my radius. So now I have my center, I have my radius. We are good to plug in to find our equation. Okay, so we'll have that x minus 2 squared plus y minus 3 squared. It's going to be equal to that square root of 10 squared. Okay, remember that's your radius squared. And so when I simplify here, I'm going to just get a 10 for that radius squared. Okay, and I want to emphasize this is one way of doing it. Yes, there are a few different options, and I'm actually going to show you another way in this next problem for number 10. All right, so number 10, they've taken care of our first step that we did in number 9. They have given you the center, and they've given you a point on the circle. So instead of you plugging into the distance formula, especially for a lot of you that are still struggling to memorize it, what you can do is if you know your center and a point on the circle, you actually can just plug into the equation of a circle to solve for your radius squared. So how we do that is we are going to plug in my center as my H and my K, and then we can use this point over here as my X and my Y in the equation. So here I would have -7 minus 1 squared plus, and we'll have that -13 plus 5 squared is equal to our r squared. Okay, to clarify, remember, in your formula for the equation of a circle, it should have the negative. You should be subtracting in between them. And so that's why I have that -1 instead of a +1 here. And then due to the subtraction that I would have in front of another negative, I have simplified into addition, okay? Because a negative times a negative just gives me that positive. So if you need to break it down in by steps so that you don't mess that up, please do. But you can also just plug it in all at once and then just work through to solve for your radius squared. So here we have -7 minus 1 will give me -8 squared plus, and over here we'll have -13 plus 5 is going to give me a -8 squared again is equal to my r squared. So -8 squared is going to give me 64. Remember, it should be positive because you are squaring it. And so I'm going to get my r squared is equal to that 64 plus 64, which will give me 128 as my radius squared. Okay, don't bother square rooting that because remember, we're plugging into my equation. And so with that being said, we can go straight into our x minus 1 squared, plugging in my center, plus our y plus 5 squared is equal to that 128. Like I said, don't worry about taking the square root of it because if you are going into the equation, they want the radius squared. They don't want your radius. So you would just plug that in and then you've got your answer. So like I said, it's up to you. You can use the distance formula, but in a sense, that is exactly what you are doing when you plug into the equation of your circle. And so either way is fine. Just find one that works for you and try to be consistent so that, you're not making mistakes by constantly switching it up. All right, now let's move into our back side of these notes, which we are going to go over writing the equations of a circle by completing the square. All right, so let me zoom out a little bit and we're going to read through these and then we've got 2 problems that we can work through to get some practice with them. So we have, if the given equation is not in standard form, remember that's your x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to your r squared. Then you must complete the square to find the center and the radius following these steps. So step 1 is if the quadratic coefficients are different than 1, you need to start by dividing each side of the equation by that coefficient. To clarify, they should be the same. Step 2, group your terms with the x, group the terms with the y's, and then rewrite the equation so that the constant is alone on one side of the equality symbol. Moving into step 3, you are going to square half the coefficient of your x and add this square to each side of your equation. Then you'll also do the same thing with your y. You'll square half of that coefficient and add that square to each side of the equation. Step 4 is telling us to factor the resulting trinomial as a perfect square and to combine like terms on the other side. Step 5 is to rewrite in standard form. So just making sure that you've got your x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to your r squared. All right, let's look at number 1, where we are going to write the equation of the circle by completing the squares so that we can figure out our radius and our center that they're asking for. All right, so starting off, we are going to make sure that, the coefficients in front of my x squared and my y squared are going to be 1. Otherwise, we would need to divide. So here we don't need to worry about that step. Moving into step 2, we are going to group them. Here we already currently have our x's next to each other, our y's next to each other, and all of our constants on the other side. So we're actually going to go straight into step 3, which will have us taking half of our coefficients for the x and the y and squaring them and adding them to both sides. So I'm going to show you what this looks like. For a lot of you, you probably won't show this exact step that I'm writing here, and that's okay, but it's the next step that I would need to see, and I will show you that in a second. And so what I'm doing here is I am pre-filling out kind of these blanks that I'm going to be filling in when I complete the square, just so that in the end I look and I see, did I add it to both sides to keep my equation equal? All right, so to do this, like they said, you're going to take half of the coefficient for your x. So I'm going to take that negative 12 and divide by 2, and then I need to square it. Okay, and if you do it to one side, you should be doing it to the other to keep your equation equal. Then we're going to do the same thing with the coefficient for my y. I'm going to look at that 4. I'm going to take half of it, and then I'm going to square it. Okay, and so to clarify once again, the step that I just did, I do not have to see this. And for a lot of you, you'll go straight into what do you actually get when you take half of it and square it. But until you get used to the process, I would highly suggest writing this out every single time, just so you are understanding what numbers you are going to be dealing with and how you get it. Okay. It's more of just understanding the process is why this might be helpful. All right. But the first thing I really would need to see in this problem here is just what I'm about to show you next. Okay, so me taking that x squared minus 12x, and then here I'm going to be completing that square, adding in what I actually should get when I take half of that negative 12, so negative 6, and I square it, I would get 36. Okay, plus my y squared plus 4y plus half what I get squared. So 4 divided by 2 gives me 2, and squaring that, I would get a 4. Remember, if you're doing this correctly and keeping your equation equal, you should be adding in that 36 over here and that 4 as well. So this would be the key thing I would need to see, is just you showing me what you're adding into both sides. And then from that, we can move into our step 4 of factoring the resulting trinomial. Okay, so the easiest way, and I just don't want you to overthink it, okay, is looking here. We are going to factor this trinomial as a perfect square. So, you can sit here and you can think, what times what will give me 36, but add up to negative 12? Well, to get 36, I could do 6 times 6, right? But to get that negative 12 that I need, it would need to be a negative 6 times a negative 6. And you can do that, or the quickest way to figure it out is just by looking at the coefficient for your x. Okay, so here, if you remember, I said that when I factored it, I was going to be getting that negative 6. I'm only just taking half of whatever is in front of my x or my y when I factor that one. So here, when I am factoring, okay, I would just get x minus 6 squared, like I said, just taking half of that coefficient for your x. Plus, like I said, you could sit here and think about what times what will give you 4, but add up to the positive 4. It's just going to be half the coefficient in front of your y. So half of 4 gives me 2. So I'll have y plus 2 squared. And then over here, we're going to combine our like terms, and we're just going to get 36. So this would be the equation of my circle. And like I said, they actually just needed us to do that to figure out what is our center and our radius. So that's not actually my answer. I need to write out my center here would be a positive 6, comma, negative 2. And then that radius would be me taking the square root, because in the equation, this is your r squared, okay? So the square root of 36 to give me 6. Okay, and then that's my answer for this problem. Now let's look at the next one, where we're going to do pretty much the same thing, but they gave us a little bit of a different equation, and this one we'll have to go through and complete step 1 and step 2 that we skipped for the problem above. Okay, so the first thing we would need to do here is, looking at it, I will notice that I have that 3 with my x squared and my y squared, my quadratic. And so I need to start off by dividing everything by that 3, every single term by 3. And I'm going to go ahead and jump into step 2 as well by grouping my x's together, my y's together, and adding that 12 to the other side so that I have my constants all alone. So here, when I divide, I'm going to get x squared, and then I'm going to look at that 12x divided by 3 will give me a 4x. Okay, plus we'll have that y squared. And then moving into over here, we have that negative 18y divided by 3 will give me negative 6y is equal to, and don't forget to divide that 12 by 3 as well to get 4. Okay, then I'm going to move into this unnecessary step that I showed you before, just so that, like I said, for those who do have a little bit harder time of understanding where we're getting these numbers when we are completing the square, the repetition of just constantly rewriting this will help you realize what we're doing every single time. Okay, so I'm going to just kind of pre-fill out everything, because I know I'm going to have to add something here to complete that square. I'm going to add here to complete that squared. And then to keep my equation equal, I should have the 2 lines being added over here as well. All right, so to figure out what I'm going to be adding to both sides, I've got that 4 divided by 2, and then squaring it, and then doing the same thing over here. Then I've got, for my y to complete that square, I would take, oh, and I just realized I forgot y squared, my bad. We would take that negative 6 divided by 2, and then square that. And add it to both sides. Okay, so like I said, this step here, not 100% necessary, but the repetition of it could be very helpful until you understand the concept of it. From there, we would need to see you actually adding in what you get when you are completing that square. So here, 4 divided by 2 gives me 2 squared, means I'm going to add 4. Then I'll have that y squared minus 6y plus negative 6 divided by 2 gives me negative 3. Squaring that will give me a 9. I should have that same thing over here. Once again, I want to highly stress the concept of when you are squaring the negatives, you will always get a positive. So no matter what you're dealing with, when you take half of it and you square it, you should be adding to both sides I did see in class a few of you were forgetting that when you square it, you do get the positive. So make sure that it is adding, always addition. Never going to be subtraction when you're completing the square. All right. With that being said, we're going to jump into finding our factors. Okay, once again, remember that little easy trick. Okay, just look at the coefficient for your x, that 4. We're going to take half of that to figure out that we'll get x plus 2 squared here. And then for my y, I'm going to look at that -6, and I'm just going to divide that by 2 to get -3 squared. And we will get on the the right side, 4 plus 4 gives me 8, plus 9 will give me 17 for my radius squared. Okay, so here's my equation. Now let's just write our center and our radius so that we can actually answer what they're looking for. So my center here should be -2, comma, +3. Remember, we changed the signs of what you see in your equation. And then for your radius, please make sure you are taking the square root of it and not dividing by 2 or anything like that, or using it, okay? Because that is your r squared. But there you have it. We've got our center and our radius based off the equation we came up with by completing the square. Hopefully this was helpful in understanding the process of how do you complete the square when the equation is not written in standard form.